we looked at this last week. We said we'd start here. There are about 4 photographs of Ogles chemists, so we'll do this one, then we can skip over the next couple.
Did we have a year on it, on the back of the photo?
Let me just have a look. No.
Welcome to our second Worcester Life Stories podcast. My name's Sheena Payne-Lunn, and today I'm taking you behind the scenes at one of the key volunteering projects in the Worcester Life Stories project. At the moment, I'm in a small room at the back of the Tudor House Museum with a group of volunteers who are studying some of the photos from the Worcester City Archives on a big screen in front of us.
The baker's on the left of the foregut patisserie, and that's Ogles in the middle. But originally they just had the left-hand half of what you see there. There was a hairdresser I think next door, and then they expanded into that space.
What was on the end? Because that used to be Dewhurst the Butchers on the end.
Yeah.
Not all the volunteers are here in person. Some are joining in on Zoom, and we'll hear from them in a moment. But first, let's find out what's going on here.
No, we don't know what it is, but it was a gents' hairdressers at this point, because in one of the images you can see the red and white barber's pole in the window.
Okay.
Not quite on this one, but that one, and I think they were all taken as a sequence, that's got a date of 1995 on the back of it. So I think we can assume that the one we're looking at now is also a 95.
It could well be as late as that, actually, yes. Yeah.
We've just had a bit of a demo, haven't we, about how all this works and how you examine all the photos. We're joined by the volunteers on Zoom as well. Hi, everyone. And we just had a nice conversation about some of the images, haven't we? So
We have, yes.
yeah. John, can you tell us a little bit about how that all works?
Yeah, well, what we do is we will bring an image up, we will put it on the screen, we will share the screen, and it's then for the volunteers to have a discussion about what they can see, what their recollections are, any other bits of information that are useful. And while they're doing all of that, I am collating that information, typing it in, which will appear in the comments on that photo on the website.
So how many photos do you think you've actually done so far?
Probably a couple of thousand, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I agree.
And if Sheen is to be believed, we've got 29,000 to go.
At least.
Yeah, we look forward to it.
Yeah, we have been feverishly sort of uploading images, haven't we, recently?
Yeah.
I've been involved in the Changing Face of Worcester, which is a precursor to this, since 2008. And we've been digitising. We've got about 8,000 photographs in that. But that was a process of scanning, tidying up, and then going through them. So, for any volunteers that are interested or anybody that is interested, this will be here long after my lifetime.
Probably after mine too.
Yeah.
So let's take it right back to the beginning, the Worcester Life Stories project. How did the Changing Face of Worcester project become involved with Worcester Life Stories?
Partly because of its interest in old photographs or photographs of old Worcester. Partly because it had a group of volunteers already working on images and collating information. And thirdly, because it had a website that was able to, we were able to upload the photographs to, and could continue the process, albeit with Worcester Life Stories images as opposed to Changing Face of Worcester images. So the processes were already all there. So I think that was the real driver behind it.
And that sort of remote access really did come into its own, didn't it? When lockdown hit, we were ready to go, really. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about how you feel the project helped when we were in lockdown?
I think it helped in as much that it kept the volunteers active, interested. And I suppose in lockdown, when you're at home, your routines have gone out of the window in a way. This was one of the routines you could keep going. We knew that on a Thursday afternoon, we would be having a couple of hours Zoom session, albeit totally remotely at that point during lockdown. And I suppose it gave, something a little bit different to do.
Hotel California, isn't it? It's like the Hotel California.
Yes.
Get out.
You can check it, but you can't get it. And I think the other thing was, we were having, I'll talk about you, Stefan, we were having quite a few exchanges in the early life when you were submitting comments in relation to photos with your information. And then when we eventually went on to Zoom, we sort of said, well, come and join us. You know, you're based in Manchester, but you've lived in Worcester. You've got a wealth of knowledge about Worcester, and you're able to join us, you know, remotely from Manchester and give us the benefits of your knowledge. And I know, you know, it's something you're very interested in, and actually, some, you know, it's given rise to some of the wider things that you're researching.
Certainly kicked my research an interest off, frankly. I mean, for my sins now, I told you last week, I've just been elected chairman of the Greater Manchester Victorian Society. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't really have got involved in that. In fact, if it hadn't been for, if you like, all the fascinating photographs all those years ago when we started, related to Worcester's Victorian past and the way it got demolished so rapidly in the 60s and the 70s. And you know, that spurred on my general knowledge into Victorian things. And then obviously in Manchester, I'm surrounded by Victorian stuff and architecture, and whole things just blossomed from there, really.
Thanks very much, Stefan. That's brilliant. It's great to hear that it spurred on all those other elements of interest as well. So, Ken, for you, how did you get involved as a volunteer?
I got involved. My wife worked in the cafe, or still does actually. And one day they asked if anybody knew anything about the co-op, apparently, and she dropped me in it. Delightfully, though, because I've never looked back since then. And going back to the lockdown itself, John used to give me homework, and other volunteers as well. Have a look at the photographs for next time and things like that. So it was very good. It kept us occupied during that time. But that's how I became involved in it, and it's been very interesting for me. And particularly if you've worked in the city and grown up with it and seen the change, and it's an amazing change across those 50 years, shall we say. And I don't think people realise until you actually see the photographs that we've got. And we're very lucky to have had them, actually. Very, very lucky.
So the photos from the that we've used for the Worcester Live Stories project are part of the historic environment record, but they were all taken by officers of the city council over a number of years. So we've got photos from planning officers, conservation officers, board of health officers, archaeologists, you know, lots of different sort of professions, but they all sort of came together. They were all sitting there in the conservation department. We were fortunate enough a few years ago to have a little bit of money to digitise them. So they were sitting there waiting for a project like this, really. And, you know, look at all the amazing things we've been able to do with them. It's been amazing, really, hasn't it? So, John, how did you get involved with the project?
Well, I've been involved as a volunteer at Tudor House for many years, and I'm now a trustee of the Worcestershire Heritage and Amenity Trust that runs the museum. Basically, I got involved because I was interested in old Worcester photographs, and also when lockdown came, I had the sort of technical knowledge behind Zoom and that sort of thing to set up the process of doing it remotely.
Just off screen to the
Gorgeous
right.
building.
Yeah, and it's just been put up for. I think it's for sale, or it's just been sold.
Oh yeah, how much?
I don't know. Have a look on Rightmove. It was sold by it's that company that got a flamingo on the.
So, has there been any particular building or photograph that's really sparked the interest of the team?
Oh, the blockhouse for me. Clearance of the blockhouse.
Yeah, I would agree, because that's a whole area of Worcester that's more or less completely disappeared, and it was fascinating to see what was there.
Urban Prairie.
I think the photograph that's generated the most interest on social media, and among some of our volunteers, was Gardener's Bakery next to the Co-op in St Nicholas Street. I can't resist mentioning it. You put it on social media, and the other one that is actually a change in face photo, but I think the two overlap, was an interior photograph from Pratley's, the China shop, and there were hundreds and hundreds of comments, and I think virtually 90% of the comments was, I was petrified going into that shop, and my mom always used to tell me to put my hands in my pockets and don't move. And I know on one of the social media pages at the moment, there's the electricity works. You know, I've had people say to me, well, where was this electricity works you speak of? But yeah, it was very visible, you know, and you see the scale of that building that is now, you know, just no longer there, and there's a few little hints that there was a power station there, but you know,
Only if you know where to look.
only if you know where to look.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the thing, though, isn't it? It's the quite mundane things the things that kind of spark everyone's interest. And I mean, I found this when we were doing the weekly lockdown quizzes. You know, obviously the most popular quiz was the one about pubs, because everyone loves the pubs. But the second most popular quiz that we ever did was on 1970s petrol stations. And you'd just never believe it, would you? But we had something like 5,000 people take part in that quiz, and they were all, you know, reminiscing wildly about, you know, oh, I remember that one, that's where I used to fill up. You know, people went mad for those sorts of things, because it's, I suppose, a common place that everyone used and everyone remembers.
Yeah, one of the quizzes you put out, couldn't believe it when it showed Nash's Passage, and on the end was a group of buildings called Alexander Place. Now, Alexander Place was something my wife had been trying to find out for years where it was, because that's where part of her family used to live. And suddenly there it appeared in a photo. And I contacted you and you sent me a better copy of it. That was great. You know, she's chuffed to death, but she actually, not only did she find out where we thought we knew where it was, it confirmed it, and there was a picture of the whole row of building.
And that's the thing, isn't it? There were so many instances of that, obscure little images that popped up through the project that no one would anticipate would spark in any interest, and yet we just got some of the most amazing sort of powerful stories that came out of them. And yeah, I mean, that's just one of them, isn't it, Keith? But yeah, some really lovely stories and memories that they evoked. My thanks to John, Ken, Keith and Stefan, who took time off to tell me all about their work, and all the other volunteers on the Changing Face of Worcester and Worcester Life Stories projects. If this has piqued your interest and you'd like to join in with the group and the cataloguing of thousands more photographs, do get in touch. You can email Worcester Life Stories or give us a ring. All the contact details are in the information that accompanies this podcast. Well, I really must leave these guys to get on with their work, so that's it from me. Many thanks for listening.